So there was lots of questions from yesterday and also from today. So I'm going to read a few that were handed in, and then also you hand around the mic, I guess. So this one says, please answer, it's very important. So I'll start with that. You know, it's such a responsibility, honestly, stepping up here and trying to do this. So in advance, please check out everything I've been saying. But I'm also grateful for the opportunity. It might not be helping you, but it's certainly showing me what I need to do, so thank you. You talked about mother's love. What do you think would the Buddhists say about lesbian relationship and love between two women? Please answer, it's very important for me, since I have a great joy in this relationship, but suffer a lot, considering my family and society's response. Yep. So, I mean, just from the Buddhist perspective, the concept of sexual misconduct, it really just relates to not harming another. Beyond that, it doesn't specify who that's with or anything like that. So, I mean, essentially, if it's two consenting adults, fine. It doesn't ask about the gender. And that would so sexual misconduct would also include having an affair, even if the two people are consenting. There's still another person who didn't consent if they're already in another relationship. I mean, this, as far as the family and society not agreeing, I mean, of course that's a big issue, and it makes life certainly more challenging and more difficult. But at the end of the day, it's impossible to do everything that's going to make everybody else happy. And if you're, I mean, in terms of doing Buddhist practice, for example, we're talking about developing our positive states of mind, developing our joy, our love, our generosity, all of the positive qualities that we can develop. If we're doing that, and if we're applying, I mean, this, we transform our difficulties. These are our opportunities. So whatever life is presenting us that's difficult, we can use that for our practice. We can use it to develop our positive states of mind. And so that, even when we sit down to do our practice, we can visualize our family, the ones who are opposing this relationship. You can visualize them sitting there directly in front of you and making the wish, making the aspiration that in your practice that you can be of benefit to them. Everything, I mean, all of the oppositions, all of the obstacles, they're all there to show us. It's like Jetsunma talks about going to the gym. We're looking for machines that oppose us, so that we can build up our muscles. So likewise, if people are disagreeing with us and not happy about our life choices, then we're being shown mirrors, and we use that to work with. And then eventually, whether they see it or not, if you are genuinely, striving to develop your positive states of mind, your mother, your family, I mean, they'll see it. They will appreciate and recognize that you're happy. I mean, for me, becoming a Buddhist nun, my Irish Catholic mother it was very, very difficult, really difficult for her. Hard to know. Yeah, it's hard to know. If you didn't hear that, he said, would she be easier about me having a lesbian relationship? Okay, next question. No, but my mother did. I mean, actually, she got to meet Jetsunma, which was you know, she's not here, so I can say it. None of us would have anticipated how well that meeting went. It so happened that Jetsunma needed to be in England to get a passport. I needed to be in Ireland to get an Indian visa. And so I said to my brothers, maybe we could bring Jetsunma to meet my mother. And they kind of went. And I said, I'm not saying she would stay in the house, I'm just saying they could meet. And so he said, okay, we could try. And so I'd booked a hotel. Also, I have two priests in our family. An uncle on both sides are Catholic priests. And one, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, even without coffee. A grand-aunt did pray for me to be a nun. She was a Catholic nun. She did pray for me to be a nun, so that worked. So my mother, when I said to her Jetsunma was coming, and my mom said, and I mean genuinely, she didn't speak to me for some years. After becoming a nun, she would hang the phone up and she just couldn't deal with it. So when I said Jetsunma was coming, I said, but don't worry, we're putting her in a hotel. She said, what do you mean you're putting her in a hotel? She'll stay with us. And my brother and I kind of looked at her. So she stayed overnight and we left the next day. And my mother had spent 6 months with very severe arthritis, and had one of those electric chairs going up and down the stairs, and had stopped going out. She was afraid. She'd lost her confidence, so she'd given up her social life, and she was quite active, but she'd stopped everything. So for about 6 months she hadn't gone out. So Jetsunma stayed for one night. We left the next day, and I rang that night, but my mother didn't answer the phone because she was out. And she just took everything up again. She took up all her social life, and she rang her friends and she said, Jetsunma has changed my life. She is the Mother Teresa of Buddhism. And we were really amazed. We really, really didn't expect that. So, I mean, that's kind of related to that question. Like, you'd be surprised. Just keep. If we stay on the Dharma path, then eventually the family, whether you see it or not in this lifetime, that doesn't matter either. I think we just have to develop the confidence and trust and not need to see the outer. I mean, it's nice when you do see the outer reminders, but they won't always be there. We just have to really develop that confidence. Yep, so I mean, someone said to my mother, but well, what did Jetsunma do? And Mom said, don't know, she just came. And so that I was very, very deeply moved by that. Okay. She's suggesting that Jetsunma could visit everybody's house. Okay, we'll arrange it, and then when she comes back, I'll give her the surprise news. Okay. Is there a question from the audience? Does somebody want to, is there a microphone going around or not? So, I don't mind. If there's any pressing questions, maybe you can just put your hand up and, yeah. I mean, I'll read some of these and then we can take some from the audience as well. If we have to take care of all beings, are we supposed to tell them that they are suffering? Be a bit of a surprise. Or we should wait for them to start their own way? Yeah, probably. I think, the main thing is to lead by example. It depends on who the person is and it depends on your relationship with them. But certainly, I wouldn't go around trying to make people Buddhist. That's not, if it works for you, fantastic. But I would say the main thing is to lead by example. And I mean, we do, in terms of generosity, one of the generosities is to share the Dharma. So to some extent, there is responsibility there to share the Dharma, but you have to be skillful with it as well. And that's tricky, very tricky. I mean, we have that phrase, but I meant well. So, all of the practices, like Jetsunma was talking yesterday about Tonglen, this practice of giving and taking, that's very powerful, very, very helpful, very useful, in a lot of situations where you think, I really don't know what to do. But you can just be sitting there quietly doing Tonglen. And I think that, whether it helps the other person or not, there's debates about that. But it certainly can profoundly affect your direct relationship with that person, so that you may, through your example, they may come to you, they may ask you for help. And if they do, just to be honest with them. But the main thing as well, from a Buddhist perspective, when we talk about suffering, you have to hold it in the context that the reason the Buddha talked about it was because we can be free of it. If we couldn't be free of it, why talk about it? It would be better to just minimize it, work on damage control, just try and have as nice a life as possible. But the reason that the Buddha is trying to get us to see the extent of our suffering is so that we can remove it. And if you don't know that you're sick, you won't go to the doctor. So it's in that context. And from the starting point again the first question yesterday was about enlightenment. Our potential is to be perfect. And so again, the only reason to look at the suffering is so that you can remove it. And that requires an incredible level of accuracy. Like when you're playing the piano, you're listening for mistakes. You're listening so that you can keep correcting them, keep correcting them, keep correcting them. You're listening. Keep changing it. Not to go, oh my God, I'll never be able to play the piano. Did you hear that? There's another mistake, there's another mistake, there's another mistake. You're meant to hear them. That's the whole point of practice.
I wanted to ask if you have any advice of how to know that you found a good teacher, especially because there is the emphasis on finding a good teacher. And also if you can just repeat the names that Jetsunma mentioned if we want to look at YouTube for some instructions. I think she said Anne Wallis or something, is that?
Alan Wallace is a shamatha teacher. Yep.
Okay. And I didn't get the other name she mentioned.
So Alan Wallace, the Dharma Friends of Israel have a YouTube channel. I just had a look at that today. There's lots of, presumably all the teachings that happen are on that, yeah. Tergar.org, you have, that's Mingyur Rinpoche. He has a very, very nicely organized online community and courses. So you can do, I think, Joy of Living and meditation. Very nice. Very, very well organized. And he's really very sublime. He's a very sublime teacher. Very authentic. There are others. I mean, if I'm not naming names, it's not because they're on a list or anything. But as far as how to find an authentic teacher, and there is a question in here that I did ask Jetsunma how to, what to do about it. If one's own community follows an unethical, charismatic leader, what can one do? I read this to Jetsunma over lunch, and I said, should I avoid it? And she said, good luck. I think it's implied in your question as well. How do you find a good one? How do you know when they're not good? It really is tricky, especially, I mean, as you know, this question is saying about charisma. I guess I'm not, be careful. We have to use our common sense. We have to check. I mean, we do it, we can be scrupulous in other areas, like a good dentist, a good doctor, a good plumber. We ask. We want advice from other people about what their experience was. So we do check. And one of the points Jetsunma made was, this is not just for this lifetime. So if we connect to a teacher, it's not just for this lifetime. So that's bigger than a plumber. But for some reason, I don't know, when it comes to spiritual matters, we can get very stupid. And you know, the Buddhism demands that we check, that we analyze, and so, I mean, I know in recent times there have been a few big controversial ones that have come to the surface, and I mean, they have to come to the surface, and everybody comments on it. And the one comment that I loved, somebody had responded, is like, have we become so open-minded that our brains have fallen out? So that's the thing. I mean, you know, we do have wisdom, we do have common sense, and Jetsunma was saying that if there are controversies around a particular teacher that maybe you have connected to, then we should be asking ourselves, just, you know, okay, how do I feel about this? And to just use our common sense. I mean, there are some indicators that would make it more obvious than not. Lineage in Tibetan Buddhism is given a lot of importance. And so, I mean, again, without naming any names, but there are some centers you go to, for example, where there's a very, very noticeable absence of images of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. That would be alarm bells. It might be that they forgot to put a picture up, or that they were cleaning it on the day, but it's worth asking. I say that because in the nunnery I walked in, Jetsunma's nunnery, it's like, where's the picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama gone? And they said, oh, we're cleaning it. But somebody had come in and went, oh, there's no picture. So it's, anyway, to ask questions like that, to check that there is a lineage and that the teacher is, you know, referring to their teachers, that they haven't become a self-proclaimed me. Because it can happen also, and in many different ways, it can happen that, you know, you start out well and just, you get used to sitting on a stage with lots of people looking at you. And it gets, you know, you can get corrupted. So I guess the main thing would be to appreciate that we do have common sense and that we are required to keep engaged with that and to keep listening to that inner voice. And you know, it may be that there are teachers that maybe they are gone off on a track, but you can still be grateful for what you've received from them. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, maybe they have still delivered some good dharma that you can just accept that and then just leave the rest alone. So, like that. It's a very important question. And I think too that we, you know, there is a little bit of a boys' club mentality as well. So it kind of feels like when something does come up, there's a little bit of closing ranks that can happen too. So just to be aware of that and recognize, you know, I mean, we're human beings. There's, you in some ways you can go, okay, but with the Dharma, surely our GPS is a little bit more advanced. You'd hope so, but sometimes it can get, I mean, we fall short. Any other question, or will I pick another one?
Shalom. I have been told that I will never die because I was never born. Because there is no I, yes, only emptiness.
Only what?
Only emptiness.
Okay.
So who is watching the movie that Jetsunma mentioned yesterday?
Did everybody hear that? Yes and no. I mean, if I threw something heavy at you, there would be a reaction. You'd feel it. I mean, come on, you would. We can't just go all philosophical and go, oh, but there's no I, so I didn't feel that. You would feel it. So there is an I, but it's a relative term. I think Jetsunma answers the second part of the question generally by saying, check and find out. In terms of, who is the observer, who is it that is observing. So there is a conventional reality. And there is ultimate reality beyond birth and death, beyond concepts, beyond dualistic mind. But it's not to say that therefore there is no I. Yeah. Okay, I'll pick this one up at the back. So I'll read one out while the microphone's going back up. Okay. The overall number of sentient beings in the world is increasing. Where do the new souls come from, according to the samsara view? So they're just coming from other realms. There's an image outside of the wheel of death, or the wheel of life. The wheel of life, held in the grips of the Lord of Death. And there's 6 realms. So what we see is just one little point on the spectrum. So even if there's more coming into this realm of humans and animals that we see, some people see spirit realms as well, they're just coming from other places.
I understand why thoughts about the past or the future are not beneficial. And I wanted to ask, what does the Buddhism say about thoughts that has to do with the present, like physical pain? When you're in physical pain at a certain moment and you have thoughts about it, how do you deal with that? How do you take these thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's not... So the question, as I understand it, you're saying, not for the mind not to go off into the past or the future, or to get caught up in thoughts about the present. And then in relation to having pain, I mean, pain is yes, it's a very tricky one. It's always about, you can keep sessions short. This is one of the things. And even within a session, the most interesting point really is when you become aware that you're gone. And so at that point, you go, oh, I've just spent the past 5 minutes, completely lost in the physical pain. But that point is the one that's of interest. You're going, oh, I'm back. And if the pain becomes so dominant, then that becomes your meditation. That's okay as well. You can, and then, come back to whatever. If you're focusing on the breath or whatever, then you can come back to the breath. It's not that you suddenly go, oh well, let's have a new meditation. But if it demands attention, if it's just then you can just be with it for a little while, come back to the breath. If you absolutely have to get up and move, then you do that as well. I guess the main thing to be aware of is that you don't turn it into a whole new commentary. You're constantly trying to work on an edge, and to be engaged, and to cultivate awareness. So there's a difference. You'll become aware of the difference between trying to develop that or just making a whole bunch of commentary about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
עוד שאלות כאן?
Okay, so pick out another one. Oh, that was too hard. How does my practice, commitment, help a loved one who is suffering terrible physical pain? Tonglen is a very nice practice. It's a very. Were you all here yesterday? You heard about Tonglen? No? Okay. So Tonglen, I had one hand waving, so everybody else was here? 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay. So Tonglen, it's a very nice practice. Is it taking and giving? Taking and giving? Tonglen, taking first and giving. Yeah. So you imagine the person who has the physical pain, that you don't have to be with them. You know this idea, you would say, and mothers will know this one, if I could suffer instead of them, I would. Yeah? If they could be free of it, I would gladly take it. And I think there are cases of mothers who can literally do superhuman actions, like if their child is trapped beneath a car. There have been stories of where they can literally lift the car, which I think is really cool. But we can. I mean, we have it. You override that self-limitation. I can't do that, and you don't even ask yourself that question. If I could, I would. So Tonglen is that idea. If I could take on all of your pain, give it to me, I would do it. But then there's this other part of you goes, I don't want it. Why would I want that? I've already got enough of my own pain. Does it really mean I'm going to have a headache after doing Tonglen for 10 minutes? But what you're actually aiming the practice at is that very thought of self-preservation. I don't want that pain. I'm sorry you're suffering, but I don't want to know about it. So you're visualizing them, and you're imagining that you're drawing in all of the pain, all of the suffering. And you can start, and it's always important to do that, start with yourself, particularly if it seems too much to even consider doing it for a loved one. Do it for yourself. And you can keep coming back to that reference point in the practice. So you imagine drawing in your own pain, your own resistance, your fear, anything. You draw it in the form of black smoke. And so here at the heart, you visualize like a black pearl, a black piece of coal, something. That's the self-cherishing. That's the very thought that's like, I don't want to do this because it's going to hurt me. So you imagine drawing in all of that dark smoke, pain, suffering, etc. And immediately that it touches this self-cherishing, it disappears, it's gone. And then as you breathe out, you send out limitless love and light. And you, again, if you're doing it on yourself to begin with, you're completely filling yourself with that loving energy. And then you can also send that out to the person who's in that physical pain. You don't have to be with them. You can just be sitting here doing it as you think of them. And it's just a very nice way to shift our concerns from, I don't know what to do, how can I help, into something that's genuinely a very, very positive contribution. And as I say, and there are cases where people will report that they feel better. But I think the main thing that's happening is that it's shifting your ability to be of use. And you know, in some situations too, it really is the case that there is nothing that we can do. But even just sitting with that and just bearing the fact that you can't change it is already giving that other person something very important. If you can change it, go for it. I mean, whatever. But if it's not possible, just to be with them and to bear their pain is already something very important. And it can help them to then find their own solutions. Because we can be a little bit over-focused on trying to make it better. And maybe that's our discomfort. Or our discomfort is involved in that. I want you to be better so that I feel okay about it. Yeah.
So Jetsunma talked this morning about like the importance of focusing on one tradition and not falling into this spiritual consumerism of taking bits of each tradition. And I understand that, but on the other hand, I wonder how does it get together with something that I feel that is almost a moral obligation of getting to know different religions, especially here in Israel, but also I saw that the Dalai Lama wrote about it in India, the idea of like more universal ethics and the importance of knowing the different religions. So my question is how not to be confused by different advices from different traditions and focusing on one tradition while keeping in mind that it is important to know the different traditions.
I don't know, did she say about traditions or about a particular practice? It was practice, but
Okay.
yeah.
So maybe this answers my question, but yeah.
I think she was, for example, you can, well, anything. I mean, I think she was talking about practices within Buddhism, so that you could be focusing on loving kindness or Tara or medicine Buddha or whatever. So, I mean, the point that she was making was that it's a bit like if you're in a relationship, then you've identified who your partner is. But it doesn't mean that, this is not about sexual misconduct, but it doesn't mean, you still go out to other people's houses and have, as you said, it's very, very important that we are open and interested in what other communities have to offer, what other traditions have to offer. But I think the main point would be that you once you've identified what works for you, then you make a commitment to that, and you use that to go deeper. And then accessing teachings from other traditions is very important. I mean, you find, we were just recently at a conference in Costa Rica, and there were, it was very broad. We had Catholic priests and shamans and elders from Mexico, and sometimes these meetings can be very shallow. They're kind of like, we're all just waiting for our moment to say why our tradition is the best. But genuinely, I mean, this experience was a meeting of, we very quickly found what we had in common and had a lot of genuine interest and curiosity, because it felt like everybody there was very comfortable with their own tradition and committed and happy with it. And then from that place, you went out and go, so what do you do? And what do you do? And oh, it's really interesting. Very important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. Last week there was an article that announced declaration there was no life after death.
Okay.
And the science is talking about this. There's no life after death.
Okay.
So it kind of shake me
Yeah.
to the ground. Can you put me back on track?
Okay. There is life after death. I mean, as Jetsunma said yesterday, who knows? And act as if there is. It's a safe bet to live a good life on the assumption that it might continue. I mean, how can you prove there's not? What did they say?
By the quantum physics something. There's no way to...
Yeah. Look, I think a lot of the challenges are about talking about what is consciousness, and does the continuity of consciousness. What is consciousness? I mean, you talk, people who are studying the brain and equating that with the mind, then we've gone off track. If we take that as the starting point, I think it would be very easy to argue that there's no life after death, if you think that this is it, this physical body. What's your personal feeling about it?
I believe in life after death. And I'm looking forward.
Good. Excellent.
I wanted to ask, how did you find Buddhism, and how did you get to it?
So my uncle, Father Pat, he was on his way from the Vatican to Ireland, and he stopped in London. I was living in London at the time. And he told me to come out to the airport because he had a very long time between flights. So he asked me to come out to the airport. And I was in therapy at the time, and my therapist was telling me I had to stand up to male authority figures. So when he said, come to the airport, I said, no. I suggested that he come into the centre of London instead, and we would go to an art gallery, something. So he came, and he gave me a very large bottle of Irish whiskey, which I didn't drink at the time. And we went to an art gallery, and when we walked in, it was an exhibition on Tibetan Buddhism. And this is interesting. I mean, we live in we believe our concepts. We believe what our mind is telling us, and our conditioning. And I mean, my conditioning at that point had gone into overload, and it was saying, Uncle is parish priest, he's on his way back from having met the Pope, and you're taking him to an exhibition on Tibetan Buddhism. Don't do it. But genuinely, even though that was in my mind, I had no response to it. I had no, and I wasn't reacting against it. I wasn't trying to provoke. I just took him in, which was very surprising. And I remember my mind going, what are you doing? Why are you taking him to this exhibition? I wasn't even interested. So we went in, and we were looking around for a while, and I mean, very, very beautiful images. They were all very old tankas. But genuinely, at that point, if you'd asked me about Buddhism, I would have said hippies and patchouli oil, which is what, that's all I knew. And I was sort of giving up religion, and I wasn't looking for another one. I've just, in that period of time in Irish history, we were all just walking away. So then, after a while, my uncle sort of looked around, and we actually did see a hippie who did smell of patchouli oil. And she was sort of, looking a little bit like she was having some sort of a big blissful experience. And he looked at her, and he just shook his head, and he said, I'm going outside. And again, my mind said, okay, off you go with them, but I didn't. I just said, well, I'll follow you when I'm ready. And then I walked into a room, and I saw some monks. And when I looked at them, my first thought was, where is Tibet? And when I think back about it, what really struck me about them was not what they had, but what they didn't have. There was something that they were, there was a lightness to them that I didn't know existed. I thought you added alcohol or something, anything. I thought you had to add things. But when I looked at them, it's like, there's a lightness, there's an openness, I mean, anybody that came near them was sort of in their sphere, and they would put their arms out and include them. So that was very attractive. And then I went to India. I was studying my therapist was a homeopath, and so I was very interested in her path, and I really liked homeopathy, so I went to India to study homeopathy on my way to Australia. And then I got to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I did an introduction to Buddhism course at Tushita in Dharamsala, and it really surprised me. It was Geshe Tashi Sering, who's a very lovely Lama who had spent a lot of time in Australia, and he was giving, it was an introductory course on emptiness for 10 days, and we were all just going, what? And it would be translated, and then at the end, really everybody's face was just like, what is he saying? And then Geshe would look and go, okay. and he would burst out laughing, and we were like, okay. So then I got to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama at the end of that, and I cried a lot, which was another big surprise for me. So just that. Forget all the crying and all of that, but I was very, very surprised to hear that it might be possible to understand reality. That was big news for me. I'd been trying various night classes like photography and whatever, and so I went to that with that same idea. Oh, here's another class I could go to, and let's see what pastime this might offer. I thought, oh my God, I think they're trying to explain reality. So that's pretty cool. Okay, another one.
I would like to ask, would it be right to say that some people regard Buddhism as a religion, while others regard Buddhism as a philosophy?
So to not regard Buddhism as a religion?
I'm asking whether it's right to say that some people do regard Buddhism as a philosophy, while others regard it as a religion.
For me personally, I ask myself, it's like, what's the religious thing here? Because I think it's science of mind. And there are rituals, there are practices, there's a whole establishment that identifies with it as a religion. What is a religion? Some people say it's not a religion because there isn't a God. So I personally, I'm very comfortable with the idea that it's a science of the mind. And I think as you start to understand the mind more, you can see that, and science is meeting it from its own place to see that there's a lot, the common ground is way bigger than we think. So for me, I'd say science of the mind.
Hi. And when you dedicate merit, sometimes I feel like it's a good deed I'm doing, and for myself. But then I read that merit actually means good heart.
That what means good heart?
Merit.
Merit.
Yeah, dedicating merit means good heart. So are you dedicating your good heart, the good heart in the practice, or your good heart?
I didn't hear it all clearly.
Oh, merit.
Merit.
About merit, dedicating merit.
Yep.
Are you dedicating good heart? I read by one Rinpoche.
Yeah.
He called it good heart.
Yep. As opposed to?
Good deed.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think good deeds arise from good heart. If you, I mean, in Buddhism we talk about the mind heart, so any positive quality arising from that would be merit